Hey everybody. Here at my usual haunt in Golden Gate Park at the ball fields. Started making a video earlier at the lake, but got a call. I don't know what to talk about today, but a couple times recently, someone that I know challenged me rather forcefully. And asked me something like, how do you think about what you're trying to do? And there's lots of different ways to answer that question. And people who are familiar with my work, they pretty much know the answer already. I think our habitual relationships with language, ideas, and knowledge are fundamentally broken, and that while our societies have been really busy producing technology for consumers in war, the between of us, something fundamentally vital in the between of all people, has been fed upon, has been converted to a resource that largely funds atrocity and is constantly seen parading around as heroic. That's the kind of shit that gives me like an intellectual ulcer. That stuff really gets under my skin. And so I'm trying to respond to that with both insights that could present us with the opportunity to acquire some developmental altitude and acceleration and motivation. I want to affect the foundations of the human relationships with representation, language, knowledge, ideas, categories. And we're trapped, most of us, and most of us will spend our entire lives trapped this way, which is a tragedy and a terrifying injustice. Most of us are trapped in very primitive relationships with language, knowledge, and ideas. Even people who are articulate, even people who are intelligent. And we have this idea that people are either intelligent or articulate or they're not, which isn't really true. And this is part of the problem that we face, right, when we start using language. We've convinced ourselves that static individual persons exist, and it's a fucking lie. It's absolutely not true. There's all kinds of features of the way that stasis is imposed upon cognitively derived targets so that we think the qualities of a given person or situation are relatively static analytically derivable, understandable, they're not. And the reason is that context changes what human beings can become. And so it is that people are not either intelligent or not intelligent. What happens that produces minds and transforms or stabilizes minds is much more complex than qualities implicit in the individual. However important such qualities, however important the role that such qualities might play in determining how high a given person can reach or how low they're willing to set the bar. So I believe that we can radically transform human intelligence. There are tools that I am carrying and that others have attempted to introduce that should be able to be made so fascinating and rewarding and contagious that we can actually shift to a much higher, a much more advanced and trustworthy and actually intelligent rather than performatively seeming intelligent, right? There's a big difference between real intelligence, that kind of fire of living insight, and highly articulate make-believe about appearances of being smart. Yeah? And I think everyone's intelligence can grow. But part of what determines not just the baseline, but the sort of upper reaches of what we can get at is our cultures and the contexts with which we're engaged. So if you go into, for example, the Facebook newsfeed, a place where people are frequently rewarded for lowering the bar, what you see is this cascade of everyone racing to the bottom rung of a ladder whose bottom rung is pretty crappy. Everyone is an overstatement. There's probably 30 to 50 people on my approximately 3,000 friends list that post content that's meaningful. But compared to 3,000, that's not even, right? When I look in the newsfeed, what am I going to see? Right? Especially if I'm looking at what's popular. So if we're in contexts that reward us for lowering the bar, that's going to deeply inform our behavior. Because we all want care, attention, benefits, the opportunities that come with having a vital, healthy, empowered social network. Those opportunities can save your life and change your mind. They can give you wings where before you had stumps. So, granting the validity of analytic characteristics, right, of things that might be genetic or situational or have to do with our upbringing and so on and so forth, everyone who wants to can acquire wings in the domain of intelligence. They can learn to see and think in ways that are so astonishing compared to what the ordinary people commonly do, that we could get them off the ground into the air. We can get them from crawling to flying. And I know this because I myself have gone from crawling to flying. And I've grown wings in places where before I had stumps. And that experience was so exhilarating that it was worth the candle, as they say, right? It was worth the suffering. And helping others to have a shot at that experience is one of the most exciting and unexpected aspects of these past few phases of my life. And even if I've only helped 4 or 5 people find some wing where before they had stump, that's worth it. But it would be great if we could help millions, if we could help everybody. And most, there are people, there are places in the world that are starving for the kinds of opportunities that relating with language and knowledge and ideas intelligently would endow. It's not so much true. I think America is a weird and slightly spoiled place, in a sense. Although, I'm not a big fan of normative generalizations in language, and I just made one. But what I'm trying to say is, America is a context. And the context has kind of implicit structure, priorities, functions, habits. Yeah. And so the people within that context who subscribe, who are inside, who are connected to it, they respond, right, with either they will tend to rebel, or they won't much care, or they'll sort of, go with the program in various ways. So one of the things, if somebody said, well, what are you trying to do? And the person who challenged me was implying that my game isn't going to win, my game isn't very useful. It's not succeeding. So if I want to succeed, I need to push harder, do something more ambitious. And that's not untrue. Though I think there are profoundly impactful extenuating circumstances that my challenger is not sensing. I just saw what I think was a hummingbird. There's a lot of geraniums here. So one of the things I'm actually trying to do is understand the histories of how we got here, the origins of the minds that we have become so ill-equipped with. And to understand the roots on which our representational experience is founded. Language and knowledge, these are representational activities. And in my view, they emerge from a fundamental fascination with or compulsion to represent, right? For example, to have a word that denotes some, point, something I can point at. The bird, the tree, the so on. And that's a very weird and useful evolutionary adaptation. If in fact it is an evolutionary adaptation, which is something most of us reasonably suppose. So I'm trying to understand, and when I say understand, I really mean like to get underneath the thing and look at it from below and see its origins. And not just in history, but in our day-to-day activity. I'm fascinated with the nature of minds. And I'm trying to understand I've had a glimpse from outside, more than a glimpse actually. I've had a complex experience outside of what most of us would think of as ordinary human cognition. In other words, I've had an incredibly intense insight experience that lasted for months. And it's gone on since then too. I mean, it's just not in its most extreme phase. But I've had this this experience that allowed me to see from outside. And it impressed on me the urgent necessity of transforming my own relationships with language and knowledge and ideas and concepts and representations. And it also lit a fire in me because I realized, wow, our species is carrying things they've never dreamt. We've been too timid to dream of the stuff we're actually carrying. And if we could light that up, if we could ignite those fuses, they don't lead to a bomb. They lead to the opposite of a bomb. Something that, instead of blowing things apart, creates accessibly intimate, vitally resounding unity that can overwhelm any obstacle. And I think it's tragic that most of us in our lifetimes will never even glimpse that unity that dwells within us, that our minds themselves derive from, that our cultures counterfeit, that the paltry virtues we settle for in the name of convenience obliterate, and that our evangelists lie through their teeth about, right? That's a really interesting trope, to lie through one's teeth. So, you know, if someone asks me what I'm doing, unless I'm otherwise inclined, I'll explain that I'm learning. And I want to keep doing that more and more intensely and broadly with like-minded others. But if they want a simple answer, I'll say, I'm trying to understand, right? To actually understand, not to overstand, though a view from above is extremely useful, right? If you want to get a taste of what's really going on. It helps if you can leave the relatively flat terrain of our common everyday experience and just rise above that terrain so that you can understand that there exist dimensionalities that most of what we're used to disposes of before they even start to move, right? And dreaming is evidence that this is true. In dreaming, these dimensionalities can be thought of as associated with ambiguity. In other words, the decision to suspend the complete collapse of uncertainty to certainty, right? To concrete identity. Huh? Now, sometimes it's very important. There are contexts in which concrete identity matters, or you know, collapsing all the way down to yes or no is important. But there are many contexts where we would benefit dramatically from preserving or even introducing ambiguity. And the minds that we are taught, the minds that we are scripted to simulate and emulate and enact in our culture, they abhor ambiguity. And that's a very dangerous thing. If, when taken beyond the contexts in which it's useful and important. So this is part of why I'm fascinated by these two topics lately. I've also made specific discoveries about them. I've had insights about ambiguity recently that are quite surprising. Whoever thought it would be a luxury to touch your own face? So yeah, if somebody asks me what I'm doing, I'm exploring. And, with a little luck, I'm pioneering. And I think it's conceivable that we can achieve, particularly in small, tightly knit groups, we can resurrect aspects of our human intelligence that haven't been seen for thousands of years. And the seeds of which all of us are carrying. Those seeds need contexts in which they can sprout and be nourished and be rewarded and be enacted and be valued. And until we invent contexts like this together, which we can do in small groups, we don't need to say we have to change the world. You don't have to change the world. You can put a group of 5 people together and create a context vital enough to start recovering some of the intelligence that's hidden within us together. If that's if you're motivated, if the people are motivated. And if they have somebody with them who's got a little bit of the, who can bring out, how to say this, who can highlight where we've missed the mark and how and why and the history of that and what we can do instead and how we can do, the techniques, the technologies. Our relationship with language is the fundamental, there's 2 fundamental technologies that make us weird as animals. The first is the capacity to make tools, and the other is the capacity to be entranced by formally representational cognition. If we can understand those 2 technologies and their origins better, we can become something humans have never seen. Something beyond science fiction and religion entirely. Our nature, what is inside us as human beings, is so shocking that if it were to be revealed in one fell swoop, your mind would not survive it. And what we've been doing is crawling along on the stumps of the 17 wings of our minds that were largely amputated in childhood. What am I doing? I'd like to think I'm bringing that to an end. To some degree, for some person, somewhere, I'm bringing that to an end. I want us to have the wings we're born with back. And to whatever degree I may succeed, someone will come later who will outdo me. And if I'm truly lucky, I will meet that someone during my lifetime. Maybe it's you. My mission hasn't always been joyful or beautiful, and right now it's pretty grim. But even though it's grim, I think it's the one I was born for. Bye-bye for now.